Hello to all, and welcome to the fabulous Riviera Maya in Mexico. How is everyone? You're all wonderful star seeds incarnating on Earth at this critical time, and try to support it and help it in many ways.
Hello to our awesome soul family. How have you been since our last webinar? Asur'Ana and I are grateful for your love and support. We appreciate all that you do to help our planet. We are staying at the phenomenal Valentine Imperial Riviera Maya Hotel. The hotel is in the jungle and feels very private and secluded. The beautiful romantic lush property and walkways add an enchanting experience. The outstanding staff works very hard to ensure that our stay is everything we have dreamed of. The food is delicious and the drinks are fantastic. Many gluten-free options are available upon request.
Welcome to our second parable webinar on a hope for a new tomorrow, and the script for hope for a new tomorrow is both Ananda and Castaneda systems. However, the Ananda system is kind of fading from the planet due to planetary shifts away from Egyptian context light motion. Ananda is really an Egyptian context of fable. The Egyptians were beautiful light wave motion humans, and their pharaohs had giant heads and a lot of layers of cortex and understood many things that most people didn't. They brought with them a smaller headed class of people, and they landed and grew their pyramids. The pharaohs had the ability to manifest everything: clothing, jewelry, and grow pyramids. And the pyramids were to foster a particular light motion that took them in directions that they needed to understand for their spiritual cause and effect of self-realization. So the pyramids, when they were originated, were covered in gems and covered in gold, and they were open to motion to feel the nature of light when you were inside that kind of structure, and that purified them because they felt the light wasn't well on the planet, and it helped them survive. They were more or less a caretaking race of others that they brought with them that navigated the equipment and understood life from a very different parable of technology. They came because they wanted spiritual freedom, and so the pharaohs gave it to them. They didn't procreate, and they left after 50 years, leaving their people to an odyssey of emulating something called power and greed and hate and war. It was a very sad circumstance of the end of their lore fables because they folded or they fell. And so we've opened up the lore fables from the light era of Egypt now, and that has never been done in this last 800 years cycle. The fables themselves are corroded and not well, and so they decided to let that go because if they were pure as when the pharaohs were originally here in the original large-headed format of understanding much, it might be very, very different. Over time, Babaji emulated fables in Ananda scripts that had to do with the major arcana of the tarot decks, and those scripts played out primarily in India, Egypt, China, and some parts of the West, but not all, because the fables themselves were not Shata-oriented, and Shata was the mega dream for humanity. And so there's a turning point now for seeds where we say, well, we're just going to go into Castaneda landscapes and not the Ananda version of something that would arise out of Pharaoh scripts or Egyptian scripts that can't really be today the way that we would wish them to. There's just lots of planetary changes and choices being made on the part of the Dao and Tao of the planet and of each and of the seas. It is going in a direction that works, and is the primary reason that we are choosing for these parable notions is that you need to internalize the dream script of different angles of direction of life for a time, when it may be needed in your future, where maybe due to some, in this case, a cataclysm of some sort might show up in your life and you're not well and you need to find hope for a new tomorrow. This photo on the screen is of Hobart, about 68 miles from the Riviera Maya, and it captured the reflection of a hope for a new tomorrow. In the parable of the hope for a new tomorrow, you find a vision, you find a direction, you find a gallant stance of something else you need to do or understand that works for you. And when it works for you, you push that vision forward and you find it in yourself to rise to that occasion and make it happen for you. The hope for any one individual or the vision that would cause the hope is unique unto you. Your Tao understands it and your Tao anoints it, but you yourself personally have to go into that vision and then see if that's really true for you. Sometimes that takes courage to go do something that you envision it may be useful for you, and then go and open the door to that study or whatever it is you need to grow into to foster that vision for where you're headed. It's very much true that the parable itself aligns in many directions. It can align around the search for the right partnership. It can align around the search for the right place to be. It can align around a career change or a choice for a new career. It can align around a project that you might choose to enhance your life, such as art, dance, music, or something else you want to do, painting or pottery making. It can arise around a choice to have a child. For some people, that creates a hope for a future where you're raising a family. It can arise around a choice to foster spiritual focuses and a choice to mature spiritually that can lead to a hope for a new tomorrow. It can also be a choice to study different spiritual concepts or learn different healing techniques that you wouldn't normally perhaps foster as a full-time job that could lead to that. There are all kinds of things that the parable of the hope for a new tomorrow can foster in the visions of your life. And where do you want to grow to be more fulfilled in you? Anybody can trigger a hope for a new tomorrow in any level of your life dreaming. It's not limited to somebody who's had a cataclysm, because a hope for a new tomorrow is also about fulfillment of the enrichment of all aspects of you. This society is very, very fascinated. You can have partnership and maybe not a career you like. You can have a career you like and a sick partnership. You can have a child or a partner, or a child and not a job. It's all limited. You have either or in all categories of existence, and in the either or, you're always limited in one area of your life that isn't a fulfilling dream. So you could apply the hope for a new tomorrow in a direction of a part of your life that isn't fulfilled, and choose to envision the fulfillment, and then grow in the direction of that dream. That's a minor hope for a new tomorrow, because you're enriching your life. So let's say you choose to go study Reiki, or study some other healing modality, or learn massage, or grow in another direction you really want. You take a painting class, or you go and learn some other kind of dance, or you go into something else that really fulfills you in between job line and your lifeline of who you are and your family life, or with children, or with all the other things you may busy yourself with, including your career. And so that's a minor choice to create a hope for a new tomorrow, to fill in your life with something beautiful that makes you feel wonderful in the things that you want to do, or could do, or can do to enhance your existence. That could include knitting or sewing, or things that can be very personal, or jewelry making, where you do something that is a gift of spirit, as you knit that into what you're creating, or painting, or causing. Because when spirit is applied to something you're creating as a gift to you or another, is a beautiful flourishment of love, care, peace, and joy, and something else that's passed on to another, or something for you to wear or enjoy for your own life. That's a gracious way to increase the hope for a new tomorrow, by filling in the fractionated areas where you don't let yourself express or understand your world as a creative human that wishes to try these modalities of reality and see what happens for you in them. A major hope for new tomorrow comes out of perhaps severe depression or an extreme loss of some sort, such as a partner that's passed, or a child that's walked away from you, or some other travesty that may occur including the loss of a job or the loss of something that you really relish in this world of yours. Sometimes these travesties happen, including a house that could burn down due to a forest fire, something else you're not expecting, where suddenly there is a huge sense of something that isn't there for you, that used to be there for you and now is not. A major hope for new tomorrow comes out of perhaps severe depression or an extreme loss of some sort, such as a partner that's passed or a child that's walked away from you, or some other travesty that may occur, including the loss of a job or the loss of something that you really relish in this world of yours. Sometimes these travesties happen, including a house that could burn down due to a forest fire, something else you're not expecting, where suddenly there is a huge sense of something that isn't there for you, that used to be there for you and now is not. When the world of the dreams goes into a knot, there's a tendency to have such a huge loss within you, you don't know how to regroup and carry on. An example of this is the loss of a twin in death. In light emotion and transfusion, you can rise up and out and through a circumstance that's very dark or very difficult or very complicated in all of its connections. And twins have made major connections in the heart, the body, the soul, the mind, and everything. And to leave that behind can be very difficult, whether it occurred that way or finally in death, it doesn't matter. The death of a twin or the loss of a twin can be extremely devastating to anyone that's in that kind of partnership. Most long for that. You don't think about the end until you run off a cliff. You realize, wow, that life is over now. But that can occur in many ways, and it triggers change because now you have to arise and shine and go in a new direction. And then who are you in that new direction that you choose for? And what do you envision for that new tomorrow? And what does it mean to foster that new tomorrow in you and in your life? The gift of these webinars really come from Jaskantar, who was an Atlantean twin of Asur'Ana, and also a twin to pair as well. He wrote the scripts for you to grow into something new as a hope for you too, okay? And the time is of the essence to go do the things you really want to in this life of yours, because the planet is still unclear about nuclear problems. So whatever it is, it's time for you to find that hope in you to grow anew in another direction that really inspires you to live, to dream, to foster your truth, to be in your creative expression, and to feel fulfilled with whatever you foster ahead for you. That's the blessing of the sea system for each of you here and always. So in the hope of a new tomorrow fable is a very, very gracious statement that whatever calamity you have witnessed or whatever you feel deep inside that you've lost. And some of you are letting go of partnership, and some of you are letting go of family that just went ill. Some of you are letting go of careers and finding something new to do. Whatever you're letting go of, you need to have a vision of something else to replace it and cause it to grow in another direction that really inspires you and brings you into new heights of joy and more fulfillment than maybe you ever knew before. And that's the dream script of the Castaneda's hope for a new tomorrow. It's useful to use hope as a motion to push you in a new direction, to explore something new that perhaps you would have never allowed yourself to understand, create, or participate in, to make your life more enriched and more gracious in your associations and everything else you wish to foster in this lifeline of yours. Now we're going to go into the first storyline, and we have another picture for that apparently. Let's see what we have here. This is a picture from Zion Park across from the museum, and in it is again the flavor of the hope of a new tomorrow from a desert scene. And in it was the Castaneda parable for hope for a new tomorrow. So in this storyline, there are three beautiful people, and they're a family knit very close together. And it's Georgia, Lala, and Vito. Georgia, Lala, and Vito are beautiful native triad of something called beauty and grace, and a little one that showed up unexpectedly because they really didn't want to have a child. Lala is the baby and Vito is the father. The beautiful mother, Georgia, passes in the birth of the baby, and it's a loss for Vito that's huge, and yet there is this baby to raise. He doesn't understand the baby very well because he's only 19 years old and he's living on the reservation. The reservation is going through improvements because of things that have come to be, such as a gambling casino, and that's provided money for new housing. And so he has a nice place to stay with his baby, and his mother steps up to the plate to help raise the child. Lala is a beautiful little girl. Lala means something true to the whole family. She is going to have a voice maybe to sing, so she's going to be a musician perhaps. They're not really sure. Grandma is known as Sisiwa. Sisiwa is not an old grandmother. She's about 52 and she loves Lala. This is a hope for a new tomorrow for sure, since it's a baby to raise, and the mother died, and they all miss her too because they love her too, and she's Vito's mother. And the grandmother of his wife had passed a long time ago and was not present in the tribal region anyway. So the baby was all hers, and she was overjoyed in Lala's presence in the house, and took her everywhere, took her to medicine gatherings and powwows, took her to school, and let her learn medicine ways at a very early age. Grandma was not a medicine person. She is a very gracious person, though, that loves medicine people and ways, and she wanted her daughter. She calls her a daughter because everybody thinks she's really her mother because they actually look quite alike. She lets Lala's hair grow way long all the way down past her waist, and braids it in beautiful ways, and puts feathers and jewels and little trinkets in it, and she's her adorable daughter that's going to be at her side forever. Lala begins to study with a medicine person at age 14, and that's awesome to her because she's learning healing skills that she never knew were possible in this life of hers. They find she's a gifted trance dancer, and she calls in the spirits too near physical, to a point that people can feel the eagles flying over them, and the horses galloping beside them, and the foxes and wolves howling or yapping in their presence. They are not real, they are ethereal, but they are there with her, and Lala's very, very gifted in her understanding of medicine ways. It's like she's a wise old woman in a little package. Vito's a contractor now, and he's building houses on the tribal lands because they have the money to do it. He's not good at managing it, and sometimes things kind of cave in or fall through because they're not constructed right. So finally, the tribal chief fires Vito, and Vito goes into a very large depression about who he is, where to go, and what to do. Lala takes it as a very personal bequest to help her dad heal and mend, maybe from the loss of his wife, maybe from the losses of many things, as everything seems to fail for him no matter what he does. He's gone from profession to profession and nothing works. There's a big stable on the reservation land with a lot of horses, and she asked the horse chieftain, named Twin Feathers, if he could help her father learn to ride in a medicine way in Horseland. She called it Horseland because a medicine way with horses is very gentle. They don't break their spirit. They learn to nurture them and touch them and love them into allowing them to be ridden. And Two Feathers was very gifted at that. He had 14 beautiful horses that were tamed in gentleness and love. There were young people that helped him keep the stables up, and they did do riding to the public sometimes for a little bit of economy, but mostly the casinos were producing that so they could enjoy their system of nurturing children with horses. So Vito went to the horse farm and stayed around it for a time, and really didn't know how to be inspired about this idea of taming horses. 3 little horses were brought in that were captured in a unique way, and he was beginning to be coached how to work with him. And suddenly he found something very unique with one mare in particular, who was white with gray spots. She had been wild, but was obviously rather young and very beautiful in her face and nose. And he learned to tame her with gentleness and would whisper in her ear all the love of his heart, because he felt something for this mare that was very unique unto him. So the chieftain of the horses 2 feathers granted him that horse as his horse, but he had to tame it enough to learn to ride it. And there is a timing to it, because they have to adjust to having a blanket on the back, and perhaps not a saddle, because they would ride them almost bareback, first to not hurt the spirit of the horse, because they felt that these things that people put on horses, that were saddles and bridles, and then they would tame them through force rather than through love, was wrong. And so he had to learn to ride the horse bareback, which meant he had to swing up onto it. And this mare, who he called Susu, was very tall. He had long legs and was a tall man, and that kind of worked for him. But the first time he got up on there, the mare just stood still and didn't go anywhere, and he's holding on to her hair and saying, "I don't know what to do with this. She doesn't want to go anywhere, just sitting here getting used to me being on her back, because usually I'm at her side whispering in her ear something beautiful and loving her. I'm petting her and stroking her and taking her out into nature, some with me to nibble on the apples or whatever's around the paths of the reservation." And the chieftain 2 feathers laughed so hard. He was sitting in the corner of the corral, and he goes, "Oh my God, this horse may not go anywhere ever. I don't know what's wrong, but she just wants to stand there and let him sit on her." So finally he got off, and he came over to the 2 feathers, and he said, "I don't understand this. I know you get on this one and it gallops away, and this one goes over here. You kind of use the hair to steer him here and there." And they kind of get the idea, and they really like that. He had ridden 2 others bareback, just in preparation, that galloped off and kind of followed the lead of how they motioned the hair on the back of their heads. And he said, "I don't know what I'm going to do with this mare." 2 feathers didn't either, but he got on her, and she kind of took off, and he got her to go this way and that way and sway and do all these beautiful canters that are unusual for a horse. She just wanted to prance, so she prances up to Vito, and Vito looks at that going, wow, this is going to be an amazing horse once I get it to move. So he gets on and she won't move. And two feathers said, now you have to understand who you are. You have to be the lead horse in the pack. Horses have to think of you as a horse, and you're the key horse. You're going to lead her where you're going. And when I get on her, and I lead her like the master horse of herself, then she follows me, and you're not acting like a master horse, you're acting like a wimp. So it took him 3 months to try to figure out how to be a master horse in himself. So he went to his daughter Lala and said, honey, this is really weird, and I know you're a medicine person. I want you to come out and bless the horse because I'm not sure what to do with her. She just stands there when I get on her, but when two feathers is on her, she leaps all over the place and looks like a ballerina. And I can't understand what's wrong with this. I'm loving this journey. It's healing me in some way I can't quite understand. And she says to him, you know, it's just about you taking charge of your dreams of life. It's like you don't. You go over here, you try to work in the lumber yard, and you don't do very well because you're not in charge of your dream. Then you go over here and you try construction, and you mess up a bathroom and have to tear it all apart on your own time and put it back together right. It's like you don't know how to take charge of your dream. And then you go over here and you muck up on a building structure on the reservation. You're being paid very well because they want to pay natives better than regular people. And they fire you. It's like you don't take charge of your own dreams either. She continues, now you have to take charge of the dream of the horse to get it to ride over here and there and there and there. It won't go anywhere just like you. It's why you keep failing at everything you do. So she came and blessed the horse, and there was sage and bells and rattles and all kinds of things. And beautiful Susu the mare stood there very beautifully with big blue eyes and of all things and kind of white and gray. And it was absolutely beautiful. He said, Lala, why don't you get on her? So Vita, her dad, gives her a hand under her foot, and she gets up on Susu, and suddenly Susu takes off. Lala has never ridden this way before, barebacked, and clings with her feet to make sure she doesn't fall off. And then just quite naturally, as if she has done this her whole life, the spirits come in, her ancestors come in. She's holding on to Susu's mane, and guiding her over here and over there, and getting her to prance by pulling up on the hair. She's having so much fun. She can't even believe that this could happen. Now she's falling in love with horses too, and this was all new to her. She's 19 by now and very gracious, and very long legs and beautiful long black hair, and she finally comes back to her father. Two Feathers is there, and he's laughing so hard because she got it like right away. Poor Vito doesn't get it at all how to take charge of the horse and let her do what she knows best, which is to gallop and prance and do all these pretty things. So he helps her off the horse because she probably couldn't swing up to it all by herself. She gets up and goes, "Wow, that's really amazing." And she falls in love with Susu and adventures to the stables at least once a week with a bag of apples and a kindness for this beautiful horse in hopes that Vito will get it one day. Well, something shifts in Vito because the medicine man of the tribe that's training Lala in her skills says, "I have to help your father because there's something very ill. I don't know what it is, but it's really not working for him. And so we're going to take him aside and give him a gift and let him do something else maybe other than horses because he just doesn't seem to get it. The mare won't walk anywhere although she is very beautiful, and Two Feathers just thinks it's hysterical, but it's really ruining his sense of internal well-being and pride because he loves this mare, but she won't go anywhere when Vito's on her. Two Feathers says it is symbolic of many things wrong in his life. Vito was adopted twice in his youth. He was a young child whose mother passed, and the grandmother passed within 3 years, and then it went to the other grandmother to raise. He may be broken in his spirit, or something from his early childhood, longing for a mother that wasn't there for him. Then his wife passed, who he loved dearly, having a child that he didn't really wish to conceive. It's all very sad for him. It's a life of losses. And here's a mare that he can't ride, and that's another loss of his heart. So the medicine man took him into a sacred ceremony of his own and said, "Vito, your name means nothing to me, so we're going to change your name because you need a real native name. Why they call you Vito, we don't really know. We're going to give you the native name of Asur'Ana. Asur'Ana means like open field or open tundra that you can go roam in to figure out who you are." So Asur'Ana was his name, and they did a native ceremony, and everybody was there that cared for him, and he went through an initiation, and he decided to learn how to powwow dance because something changed Asur'Ana with his new name because suddenly he was native when perhaps he didn't feel native before. So he found a powwow dancer to learn from, and soon Asur'Ana took on the beat just beautifully and would fly with the eagles or leap with the wolves or dance with the horses in the spirit of himself. And so Susu the mare came to the ceremony and stood in the background as he powwow danced. Asur'Ana didn't know if that would change something, but he wanted to, and it was a sacred ceremony. Little Lala got on the horse and rode her around a ring, and everybody clapped because she just pranced in beautiful ways that made everybody feel sacred in this gathering of about 50 tribal members for a powwow of their own. Her father danced and the horse pranced, and she felt a lot better about her future life because being a medicine woman that's young isn't always respected by the clan. She's not paid well often, and that's disheartening to her to know what to do or where to be or how to grow or what to do that works for her too. Medicine men often receive gifts and little money too, so she feels it's a path of poverty and doesn't really know what to do. But somehow in the ceremony and watching her father dance and find his native roots, she realized that she had to do something else. She was a high school graduate of medium grades, but she decided she had to do something else because a medicine woman of her wasn't going to do well unless she did something else. So she chose to go to massage school. That was better for her because she was gifted in working with people in light wave motion of herself. And she found her hope again when a beautiful spa in the native land hotel beside the casino that had recently expanded and grown open hired her right away. She knew she would end up in the management position of that spa one day, but she would add her medicine treatments to the people that wished them and added a sweat lodge and some other things that were unique, and that began to work out for her. By her mid-30s, she was well enough in her economy to purchase a small townhouse on the reservation land to contribute to her own journey of life. The reservation people often would go adrift into drugs or alcohol or other problems. Her father improved a lot and chose to be a powwow dance teacher. He wasn't well paid, that somehow Lala supported him through his quest to understand his nativeness. She learned how to help him create beautiful costumes of deer skin that were beaded and shawled in all kinds of directions. He grew his hair long like hers, and she would braid it before his performances. She loved her father having the love of his life as a powwow dance teacher and didn't want to take that away from him, and she had encouraged others to go work with him some. Her spa was busy and prolific, and her medicine treatments awesome, and the tribe honored her one festivity of their own as their beautiful medicine woman of everything they could imagine, in a world of white people that created their mansions, because the money is so prolific coming out of the casino that they all could have decent housing. And what they had to face perhaps within themselves was the need to be native and not white, and be at peace with that, and learn to live their lives not by working the casino as much, but by walking their truth in a path of their own that would be astute as a nation of people trying to find their land again, their heart again, their honor again, and their peace again. Soon gatherings began to occur for the healing of the people of this tribe, and they were private with the medicine man, and Lala was always at his side, and Sanwa would be there too. Suddenly the medicine man dropped dead, and Lala said, "Oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to do without him. He's like the father I never had, and the grandfather I always wanted. He was a man in my heart, and we never danced together except as father and daughter. But I loved him forever, and I don't even begin to know what I'm going to do without him. Even in my spa, because somehow he inspires me as we decorated in the spa with all these native instruments that I hung everywhere just to feel as if I'm in native land and not with these white people. I send the native girls to learn massage and then do the treatments. We are all very gifted, and I take the profit for each of us of this world that seems to need to use things or hate things or injure things or not be well with us as natives." Lala continued, "I don't say anything to the people that come in for treatments. It's all going to be wonderful, and they leave feeling beautiful because that's my gift for them, because I understand that all humans can have heartache or heart range or difficulties through time anyway." And so she takes over the lead of the medicine woman of the tribe. She begins to carry on with the healing that the medicine man had prescribed for those that felt injured and those who felt suicidal. And for a time, it was many, many young people showing up in her healing circle. They would drum and they would rattle, they would play their instruments, and they would also smoke their pipes, asking Great Spirit to come in and heal their heart and mind. She didn't understand why all the young people were so depressed and so suicidal, and she shifted something for them so they could somehow find that pride in their own existence. She realized that the education system, which was white-based, and even though it was a school on the reservation, was somehow derogatory or uninspirational, or created a loss in these young people. And she didn't understand why that should be. Why should the education system be so ugly that it would discourage our young people for wanting to live? Most of these young people were aged 12 to 14, and they all wanted to commit suicide because they couldn't find a future in their minds that meant anything to them ever. She visited with the teachers of the junior high and said, "This is what I'm experiencing as a medicine woman of this tribe. These young people are depressed and they want to commit suicide, and I ponder what's going on in the education system that may be created that in themselves." And they said, "Oh, they're not passing their tests, they're failing." Lala said, "That's sad. Why do you have to place a grade on somebody to tell them who they are? We're native people. We don't believe in this, okay? We don't believe that grades measure who we are. We believe in our tribal systems and who we love ourselves to be, with the creator of our land and our people. And so I don't like your approach, and I don't know what to say to them, as I know the school has its issues, but I think that's sick not to encourage them in another way and let them grow suicidal." So she left, and the three teachers who had been called to that meeting looked at each other and looked down and said, "Oh, that's really sick too in a way." They got it on some immeasurable level that the system of education really didn't help people find their inspiration or find their truth or enthusiasm for life. Perhaps their minds don't work in a way that want to study numbers or languages or whatever you're teaching them were needed. So Lala set up a native language school separate from it all. She wasn't as gifted with the native language as an auntie and uncle that she knew, and they came in and taught these young people their own native words. Suddenly, something else shifted in each of them that had been failing in their school because they were native and they knew who they were, and they needed to do this more than maybe regular education. So Lala investigated education that could be encouraged within their own system, but knew that society wants people to do schooling. She found massage easy because it involved the body and how it motions and how its muscles connect to the bones and nerves and ligaments, and how to work with it to release its stress, and that made sense to her native mind. She hadn't done well in school either and had middle grades at best, but in massage she was okay, and so she encouraged these young people to think of going in another way that would work with them. And there is always the casinos to work, and you can go do that for a time, but there's many ways to express yourself and find your truth and find your way. Two of them that had attempted suicide and been rushed to the hospital ended up working with two feathers and the horses, and somehow they healed in their spirit, body, and mind in a gentle connection of those beautiful animals. Another one of them chose to grow in another way under the care of the powwow dance system and learned to dance too. Others decided to do something else unusual. They wanted to set up a native museum related to their tribe for the people coming to the casino or the spa, and now there was a golf course, and they wanted it to be true to the tribal truth of themselves. And so they assembled many exhibits. They painted the walls, they added sound, they added music, they added a film that they created at 3 powwows that occurred the year before. They added all these beautiful tundra scenes that were amazing in their creative vision of what might be that expressed the truth of their tribe in their history. The museum grew into 4 more rooms of beautiful exhibits they created, and soon they were charging a rather nice amount for each person that would go through it. They added a cafe to serve native food that was useful to the tribe or harvested of the land, and people would try it. There were many things that inspired those that designed their museum to create something else called a ceremony that others could be invited to. So they wanted to do a powwow for the public that came to the casino and do it in a native tradition and native drag and have amazing scenes. They asked to have a little medicine woman host the event and speak and do what she needed to in her Lala way. She had a beautiful voice too, and she was developing that some because singing made her happier in her mind, body, and soul. She didn't compose the songs, but several of the musicians in the tribe had, and so the gala event came together. They charged only a small amount and discovered they filled the whole auditorium of people interested in their ways. And so the work grew because she felt the blessings of the creatures coming through, and many had lucid experiences of eagles flying through and touching their shoulders, and horses galloping through the audience, and creatures showing up and howling and barking and doing other things that was very unusual. And the memory banks of these people who attended, who numbered only 100, was somehow shifted in something else that perhaps they needed to understand the native way, had a truth, had a place, had a vision, and has something to say or share with the rest of the population. So that's the end of that fable, but it's a mesmerizing fable to go into because it just expands and flowers and expands and flowers and expands and flowers until it catches on everyone you associate with, that they too have a right to find their hopes for a new tomorrow along with you. The end of that parable. Now we're going to go on to our second parable, and I'm going to go on to another photo here. So here's another scene in another parable about life in its unfolding, or its flowering, or its joy of experience, of partnership. This is more of a partnership-oriented fable of a hope for new tomorrow. In this fable, there are a couple that are very disgruntled with one another. Maxwell is a very gifted engineer and makes a lot of money. He's always away from home, and his wife, Chelsea, just really can't stand her marriage at all. When he's away, she's okay, and when he's home, she's not. And something about it is just so sour and bitter. They don't say very much to one another. They've been married for 12 years, and in the beginning, it was helpful and romantic, and they took care of one another in unique ways. Chelsea really wanted to have a child, but couldn't conceive, and had thought of adoption and everything in her for not having a child of her heart is somehow dying. She's dying inside without a baby to help give her something sacred in this world of hers. Maxwell is not home enough to try to conceive. She thinks of going to the sperm bank and doing it that way, and not saying anything, and picking a picture maybe of a man that kind of looks like her husband. Oddly enough, she does try it 12 times and still doesn't conceive much, to her sadness. So somehow her body is just not able to procreate, and the longing for a child doesn't make up for her nursing career. Chelsea is a gifted nurse, and she gives and gives and gives to these elderly people that are not well, and she loves them some, and they remind her of the grandparents she never had because both sets were dead by the time she arrived, to older parents who cared for her a lot and were still some in her life. These elderly people reminded her of grandmothers and grandfathers that she never had. She cared for them by taking them to the restaurant part of their home quarters so that they could eat or their bingo and sit at their table and sit at their side. And she nurtured them a lot and wished for a child to nurture too, but wasn't sure how to go about that at all. So she went to a counselor who was very gifted, named Nancy. Nancy was a gifted psychologist who had worked with many people, and she said, "Well, you have to pinpoint where your misery really is. If it's not at work, then it has to be at home. And what can you do to improve your marriage?" Finally, after a lot of discussion and about 9 months' worth of counseling, Chelsea just simply chose to divorce. Then there was all the scurvy over who gets what and how to sell the house and what she's going to do next. She finds a little townhouse she can afford after divorce is finalized and moves out. Suddenly, she's faced with another level of loneliness she never knew before in being by herself, and she didn't know what it was about. Chelsea thought, "Well, I have my freedom. I have my townhouse. It's very elegant. It's very new. I have beautiful new furnishings I could afford and filled it with things that I believe in for myself, but something is still missing deep, deep, deep down within me." Nancy continued to counsel her once a week, and finally she said, "Chelsea, you need another partner that really works for you, and perhaps that's all." So Chelsea started to play the singles game online with an ad. She's a very pretty person, but gained a lot of weight. Nancy said, "Honey, you got to diet big. Get yourself down to size and go do something more physical to get active and bring your body into shape." So out of the desire to have this new mate, Chelsea did this. She decided to change her name because Chelsea really wasn't who she was. She chose the name Naomi, and that meant something to her from an old person that she loved as a grandmother of her heart who had the name Naomi. She chose that name for her own unique inspiration of what that meant because Naomi had lived a long, long time. She raised 3 children. She married 2 men that she adored. She cared for them until they died and was there at 96 in the old people home for her to feel inspired by with all her stories. So Chelsea became Naomi, and something happened in that name change that was very unique for her because it was going to be the beautiful one that has a fulfilling partnership and perhaps family. Maybe he will have kids and she can help raise them, and life will be different for her. So she holds on to that vision and won't deny somebody, children, a date, or whatever that is. She loses 40 pounds and she gets a new wardrobe. She looks quite swell and sweet. She gets a manicurist to take care of her fingernails and a new life hairstyle. She goes to an esthetician to work on her face, and they clean it up and make it look beautiful. Now she's ready to date, and that takes her about 9 months. She decides to do it that way because she needs a picture for her online dating page. And she gets one from a photographer in an amazing costume of herself, and suddenly there are men writing to her for a date. She goes on 3 dates and is very uninspired, for they're very boring or banal in their persona. She's not sure what's wrong with all of that. She goes back to Nancy and says, "This is very strange, but it's like they have no persona, or something's wrong with these men that I've tried to date." Nancy just says, "Keep going because you have to work through all of it and figure out what it is that's attracting them, and perhaps there's something in your picture that attracts banal men and maybe need to change it." So she gets a new set of pictures in like a cobalt blue outfit, and she's smiling more and her hair's up and seems very flirtatious. And suddenly men start writing her again in a different direction. They like to flirt and play and have fun. So she finds one that's very caring, and his name is Mark. He wonders about her name Naomi. "That's a very weird name. Who named you that in your family?" And she said, "I took that name on from a beautiful Swedish woman named Naomi. She had a beautiful life, and I had loved her very much. And she finally passed, and I decided to take on her name into a name change." So Mark courts her a lot, and they dance and they prance together and they make love until the night is over. But he doesn't seem interested in marriage or anything else other than what they do. 3 years go by and it's the same rhythm. They see each other every weekend and they make love, sometimes less and less, because that seems to be somehow going out of the mission of this quest. Naomi goes back to Nancy and says, "This is really strange." And she says, "Well, you have to send an ultimatum that you really would like to marry him or be in a marriage again. And if he isn't really willing to do that, you need to let him go." And so she does, and he walks because he doesn't want to be married, and he doesn't want to have children, and she wouldn't have children anyway. He knows that, but it's not right for him on some other level, and in the end, he claims, "It's not your body or your face. There's just something missing in this partnership system that I can't understand." So Naomi decides to go work with a teacher about partnership systems and think about a lot of things that work or don't work between man and woman. She studies with this teacher for 8 months, and some of it is online and some of it is in person, because she goes to a gala event in the Midwest that he's hosting, and that's fun, and she's hoping to meet someone there, and she does. His name is Frank, and he's a beautiful man, but he lives in Colorado, and she's in Southern California, and it's kind of far away. But she thinks about it because as a nurse, she could get a job anywhere, and they begin to date from far away and have these romantic excursions. She talks to Frank a lot on the Facebook page so he can see her face. Naomi makes sure that she's always looking pretty and has all her makeup on and her lipstick on and her jewelry on and all these things so that they can share in the occasion. They court this way for about 9 months, and then he asks her to move to Colorado and move in with him, and she says, "I really don't want to do that without marriage." Frank objects to that and says, "We have to try this first because I did that one time and I divorced her in less than a year because it just didn't work out living together day by day. I really want you to understand that we need to understand each other. I mean, we do all this work around partnership with this teacher that we care for, and his work is very, very scrutinizing about how people live together, and so we have to go through all his tests. There's 36, and if it works, then we'll marry." Naomi thinks, "Okay, I'll rent my townhouse because I don't know what's going to happen, and I'll find a job near Denver." And so she does, and his house is kind of small and cramped and weird in a way but is to try these 36 tests over 12 months to see if you work out well together. Now, Nancy kind of laughs about it because she reads about the tests through Naomi, and she says, "Well, you know, this man, if he really wants this, is very much thinking about what works and doesn't work in a live-in situation." so perhaps that's better for you. And so Naomi decorates his house because she can't stand the furnishings. He has a little extra money and invests in new couches that he agrees to and a few new things that makes it tolerable to her. And they're there for this 12-month period, and it all kind of flows very nicely. And she says, well, this is beautiful. I can sell my townhouse, we'll get married, and we'll buy another house that's more beautiful for both of us and be better. And he doesn't want it. He doesn't want to marry, and he doesn't want another house, and he doesn't want to do anything but have her move out. Now Naomi is absolutely stunned for 12 months. They did all these things to see how they flourished. They had romantic interludes. They made love regularly with candle-lit rooms. They did all these things that this teacher tested, and he doesn't want to marry her, even though it seemed to go well. So she said, well, how did it not go well for you? And he says, I don't know. This just doesn't feel right in my gut, even though we passed all these tests in this space of me. I can't go forward with this union. So Naomi is so upset, she calls the teacher for a private session, and she flies all the way to Minneapolis to have it. He works with her for 2 days and in a series of sessions that cost her a bundle. So she goes through everything they did, and he said, honey, partnership is intimate, and it has to be there on a kinesthetic level, body to body. And if it's not there with one, it's not there for you either. Let it go and go find another, since you're a very pretty woman and there's many ways to meet men. I have a singles club and I invite you to join and find it online. And they're only personal invitations of people I think that are very aware and very wanting partnership and very much caring. He invited her to attend another workshop he was hosting in the West up in Portland, and so she agreed to come and felt a lot better when she returned home. He restored her hope that there's something about biochemistry that just didn't really work, and so Naomi joined his singles system. Only 4 men wrote to her. Usually she would have dozens on her early dating service, and they were very, very interesting to witness. They weren't necessarily handsome. One man was an architect from Arkansas, and they wrote back and forth for about 2 months, and he said, no, I don't think you're the one for me. The other 3 kind of petered out too, and she thought, well, maybe it's not going to come through his system. But finally, another one wrote. His name is Devin, and he was kind of handsome, but very unique and raising 3 children, and he lived in Colorado. And so once again she thought, I am back here in San Diego, California, but Colorado is very beautiful. So she went to visit him, and it was just for the 2 of them to get acquainted. He went into a hotel because his kids had to stay in this mansion. Devin was quite well off in his own way and had a big house and property. His kids were into many things. They were 6, 9, and 11, and each of them were unique in their persona. The youngest one wanted to work with horses, and he had sort of a nanny that was part of a system of wardrobes that took care of them, in addition to sending them to a Waldorf school that was very amazing for young people and teenagers to grow into. That intrigued Naomi too, because she says, well, he really cares about his kids and can afford it. So they continued to date periodically, and she would fly in and out, and he would come down to San Diego. Devin liked California a lot, but it's a lot more expensive than where he's living, and what he could afford would be mediocre instead of outstanding. So he didn't want to give consideration to that word. And Naomi had found a job working as a nurse with young children that were coming to a treatment center with severe diseases, and most didn't recover. That made her very sad, but he admired her for that, and eventually he proposed. But she hadn't really met or spent time with the children, and that concerned her. And so she told Devin, "You're a beautiful man, but I need to know your children better." So Naomi flew all the way back to Minneapolis to have a 2-day session with the teacher on partnership, and said, "He's on your side and I haven't met his children." And he said, "Then that's a very important thing for you to go do. So take them one by one out for a meal and get to know them." And so she did. She didn't stay in their house, but she came over for a Christmas meal, but stayed in the local hotel so he could come and be with her on his own. She thought that was kind of strange because it's Christmas and they're engaged, and she could sleep perhaps in his own bedroom. But he didn't want to do that in front of the children until they were married. She thought that was very interesting in a way. The Christmas holiday went very well. There was his mother that also showed. And she met her and was a little put off by Mom, but Mom didn't live in Colorado. She lived somewhere else, and that probably is okay. Mom doted on these kids like you wouldn't believe, with piles of toys and gifts and clothing and all these things, because the family is kind of wealthy, and she thought that was very nice. Naomi had brought each of them a gift she thought they would be interested in, but they weren't, because it was just something that she thought was interesting, but they really didn't. She doesn't know children very well, and she really grasped that after she spent the holiday season with them. That concerned her some, but the marriage went through anyway. The two of them had a beautiful ceremony and were there, and there were many friends of each of them that attended. The children were all there, all so beautifully attired, and the bridesmaids and the groomsmen were all there. It was quite a succulent occasion. There was beautiful food and champagne and amazing cake ceremony, and they rose to the heart of themselves because she had been taking dance lessons with him in preparation. The honeymoon was astute. They flew to Hawaii and had an amazing time for 2 weeks, in a mansion that he had rented. When they returned, she knew she had to get down to life with these kids and pondered what that meant. But realized that with the Waldorf nanny that it was a lot easier to ascertain how to interplay with these children. The nanny explained many things about the three kids. Little Claire had a problem sometimes with her memories and couldn't remember anything. She's the one that's now age 12. She's a very pretty girl and likes to dress up and fluff her hair and get new clothes. The nanny said to take Claire out shopping with Devin's credit card and get her things she likes because she's outgrowing her clothes. So Naomi did this one afternoon and they had a good time. She took Claire to Nordstrom's and the little girl's department. She got 5 outfits that was divine. And they got shoes and a hat and all these kinds of things and spent quite a fortune actually on his credit card. So they came back with all these clothes and that was there. And she said, well, you have to model them all, and if he doesn't like something, we'll take it back. So she's modeling each outfit and she's prancing around and she has fun. He loves all of the outfits on her and let her keep them all. She's so happy and gave her dad a grateful hug. The next one down is a little boy, Zach, going on age 10. And he's very, very active physically. He likes to play soccer and baseball and he wants to learn golf. Zach says, will you learn to golf with me? And Naomi thinks, I'm not working right now. I really don't want to because I have to get to know these kids, which is a beautiful, responsible thing to be a new pseudo-mother. So she told them, I'm not really your mother, but I'm your friend, and we'll have fun. That's her approach with these children, and they really liked it. So they have started going to the golf course weekly and getting lessons and learning to pitch this ball here and there and ride the cart around. They would laugh and laugh and laugh together because somehow the joy of golfing was just too much fun. Devin didn't golf and she thought that was okay because his son really wanted to do this. Devin was impressed with Naomi in many ways for her willingness to be with his children, actually to be with them and listen to them and try to help them in some way. That was beautiful for him to witness in their emerging teenage years. Now, the little 6-year-old going on 7 is very cute and very inquisitive and very much in need of love. Judy sits on the nanny's lap and huddles with her, and Naomi picks her up sometimes and holds her, and she's very open to that, to being held by Naomi too. And so they go off on a day spree just to spend time together at an amazing amusement park that was filled with animals, that she could ride a little horse and do different things that were interesting to her. Naomi decided she loved a little one most of all because something about her was just open-hearted and absolutely amazing to experience. She didn't want the nanny to go away because she helped them with their homework and they all loved her so much. And Devin said, "Well, I can't really afford her anymore now that you're in this household." She said, "That's very sad because they love her so much and break her heart. So maybe we'll reduce her hours some to help her find another household to serve, and she can go back and forth." That was more difficult to foster than Naomi realized because the next household needed her full time. Therefore she left, and the kids kind of wept some, and she said, "I'm sorry, Dad says we can't really afford this." Naomi said to Devin, "I could go back to work, but I really enjoy your children." And he says, "In my observation, they're really responding to you, and I want you to be with them more." So she took over the role of helping them with their homework and some other things, and they grew very close together. Devin was very happy to have this beautiful nest to come home to because they cooked together and prepared unique foods for him to enjoy. And sometimes they went out, and sometimes they went on amazing holidays together because she didn't want to leave the kids behind. The only thing that suffered were their intimacy because somehow the love-making diminished to none, and the romance folded between the two, and the kids seemed to preoccupy all their time. She pondered this on another journey back to Minneapolis to talk to her teacher about partnership, and he says, "That happens if you don't take romantic interludes to be by yourself." So she decided to have grandmother fly out and dote on the kids one summer and have a 2-week holiday just with her man to find out if they were still suited to one another as romantic partners and not just family. Naomi spoke to him quite diligently about what she felt, and Devin responded to her, "You're right, we do need to do that for ourselves." They had a wonderful 2-week cruise to the Caribbean where the romance was high, and they ate a lot of food and both gained a fair amount of weight, but had a grand time. It was happy to return to be with the family some, but recognized that they needed to have these romantic interludes regularly for themselves. Grandma was so happy to be with the kids and dote on them and spoil them and do all the things she wanted to do. The next trip came around, and Grandma wanted to take them to Disneyland in Florida, and so she did. The two of them waltzed up on another romantic occasion to visit Australia, where they could roam around many places that they had always wanted to see, and loved one another all the same in this journey of the two. The family grew, and the children blossomed and continued to mature, and Naomi was worried not about the empty nest, but about the oldest daughter, Claire. Claire seemed to have a preoccupation to do odd things with men, and sometimes she disappeared for days at a time and not come home, and both of them would be worried. Claire surfaced pregnant finally at age 19, and Naomi didn't mind the idea of having a baby, but Devin thought that was way too much given that she's only 19 and she should abort. But Claire didn't want to, and Naomi thought, Well, we have to negotiate this out in all fairness to everything. If she stays, I'll help raise the baby. And Devin said, I want time with you without another child. This isn't going to work for me. So Claire will have to do her share of trying to juggle a child and university and all these things. And I just say no. And so Naomi had a heartfelt conversation of how difficult it could be to have a child and live her life. She thought that abortion was best, and Claire should give consideration to the man that she had the pregnancy with because he wasn't interested in her for marriage or anything else. So Claire did abort, and that was sad for her. Naomi convinced her to go on the pill. That would be better for her sexual encounters, and things would go different perhaps later on. But Claire went into a huge suicidal depression after the loss of her pregnancy, and that no one expected. Naomi had never been pregnant, so she didn't understand these hormonal imbalances. Claire did succeed at committing suicide, much to the sickness of the whole family. Something was triggered deep within Devin about trying to tell somebody what to do with their life when maybe it wasn't right for her. He could afford to help her son, but he hadn't offered that, and didn't know that suicide would be the outcome of that enforcement. Devin just crumbled as a man right in front of Naomi over the loss of his daughter. Naomi didn't know what to do with him to heal or mend his guilt over what he had enforced that led to her suicide. The other two had a hard time too because their sister is gone. Grandmother was really upset as she came to visit that Christmas because she didn't know what to say to anybody about what happened in that circumstance. So Naomi and Devin went back to their teacher and asked him, how do we deal with this experience? He was very, very sad, and he said, you don't know what's in the minds or hearts of your teenagers that make them choose for these things. And she might have chosen for it anyway, leaving you a child to raise on your own. You don't ever know what's wrong sometimes with people inside themselves. If they have counseling, that's probably better, but you never thought she needed something. It's a hard call, isn't it, to know what's going on inside another. He was very compassionate and helped Devin find a space to perhaps forgive and find the truth in the circumstance that had been caused. Naomi grew closer to Devin in a love nest of herself as a result of the loss of Claire, and over time Devin's heart did mend. He found his mission once again to be present more for his children. His son Zach really missed him, and so did Judy, his younger daughter. Judy was turning out to be a splitting image of Claire, and that concerned him too because she was so pretty, men would be attracted. Naomi spent a lot of time with both children, and Devin too, and in time they amended themselves and they found a new hope ahead. Zach graduated with a degree in psychology, and Devin thought that was a really good thing to do, and he was going to go on to do graduate work because he thought that people need to understand themselves and understand their life and understand everything. and Claire needed to understand more, and he didn't know how to help her. They often had family discussions about the loss of Claire and what that meant to each of them, and how to mend themselves over that loss within themselves. Judy decided that she really wanted to go to dance school, and so she did. Devin didn't object when he might have otherwise. He wanted her to fulfill herself. Naomi said, "We have money for that. Let her go and find out if she can be a modern dance artist or whatever she thinks she wants to do with that beautiful body of hers." In the end, she also became a fashion model, and it hit the big newsstands with her on the front cover of Vogue. She had such a beautiful face and beautiful blonde hair, and was very tiny and thin in her own way. Naomi was concerned at the sudden popularity of this beautiful little girl that she had loved and raised for many years now. Popularity didn't do well for her, as she really grew unwell in her associations, and much of it was drug and alcohol related and alcohol oriented. Finally, she ended up in a drug rehab center, and Naomi went and spent time with her, but the life wasn't well in the end, and the second daughter didn't commit suicide, but overdosed on a large dose of meth and died at the midnight hour of her own call for help. So once again, the family was crucible, with only one remaining son, who is going to be a master psychologist of himself because he's going to get his PhD now. Naomi and Devin ponder what it is about this world that causes such circumstances to arise. I mean, it was big fame as a major model and a lot of attention, and she couldn't deal with it and overdosed herself on drugs, maybe even to be in front of the camera. They didn't really know because she was flying between Paris and Rome and all these gallant places, and she called home every once in a while, but was really very much on her own, and then suddenly dead. Naomi said to Devin, "It's heartbreaking to raise these kids and let them grow and fly into something perhaps amazing and beautiful. We're so impressed with her model pictures, you can't even imagine how beautiful she is, and yet somehow and somewhere in all of this, she's dead." And the two of them decided with their son one year not to spend the holiday for Christmas. Mom has passed suddenly of a heart attack anyway, and so she wouldn't be there. So the three of them go off to a beautiful island experience in the Caribbean for nearly a month to spend time together and try to work through the losses of the second child of their heart. Their son Zach was very happy to be with them. He needed to discuss his position about his thesis and other things with the two of them. He was the most intelligent of the three children and had a very gifted time counseling others in teaching psychology at the university as an assistant teacher. He's a beautiful young man, and they were happy to be with him, but somehow the loss in their heart was still there for the other two daughters. Over time, the two of them grew grim in their marriage, and they needed to find something else to keep Naomi and Devin going. And so the cycle of fables came along to say, what do we need to do in order to be better out of these losses? And who are we together in our marriage in relation to all of it? Somehow they found it in their own selves to seek a counselor of support for the two of them, and they chose a man named Ray, who was very, very gifted and related to their teacher in his style of understanding. So they worked with Ray for over 9 months and recovered their spark somehow together, as Ray gave them tips and understanding of how to remember that the two of you are first and foremost. It's not about your children. They're grown and they go where they go. You lost two due to circumstances you can't understand. Be well with who you are. It's not about your son. Leave him to his life. Have one another. And so they did, and that was the hope for their new tomorrow together. All right, now we're going to go back to our first picture. And we have one more storyline for you. Whatever we do in life, things can still turn out to be something you don't expect in the dreams of yourself. We assume as we do this that life is what it should be and is not, and in the hope for a new tomorrow, you find a new spark of a new journey that will carry you forward in a new direction to a place that you can love and sing and dance again, wherever you are and whoever you are and whatever you are doing in this life of yours. That's the gift of this fable. Now, our last story is about an instance that is very interesting to experience. It's about a beautiful young child that was adopted at age 2. They knew that the parents of themselves wasn't really well with raising children, and little Helene wasn't happy somehow with her parents, who were very educated. They're both PhDs of this or that. Dad's name is Paul and has a PhD in philosophy, and mom's name is Edith and has a PhD in sociology. They're very well educated, but very somehow unfamiliar with what it means to raise a child. They adopt this child, Helene, because they wanted to experience raising a child. Edith couldn't conceive, and the baby came through the adoption agency, and they named her Helene, but she's really from South America. She has beautiful curly brown locks and big brown eyes and this beautiful cafe au lait skin. And they try whatever they can to understand little Helene, who cries all the time for the loss of something she doesn't really understand. But in time, Helene grows out of her crying spells and into something else that she enjoys, which is a sort of preschool of Montessori style where she can meet other children. And somehow her heart mends as she bonds with other kids that are in need of love too, and life begins to grow more beautiful for her. There is a nanny because both the professors are busy much of the time. The nannies come and go, and Helene loves them all, but something happens, and then they motion on. Finally, they bring in a woman from Panama who's rather young to work with, Helene as her latest nanny. Somehow the South American's way helps little Helene grow and play and laugh and sing again. And Romina is like a cousin to her, somebody beautiful. But after a year she has to go back to her culture because she can't stay in the US. Helene mourns the loss of Romina, who she cared for maybe more than anybody else that had been in the household. Once again, her mom didn't understand her teary nights. Edith asked what was wrong, and Helene said she missed Romina. Her mother said, "I wish we could keep her, honey," but she had to go back to her parents in her country. They brought another one in from South America, and that helped somehow little Helene in mending her heart. By now she's about age 9 and she's starting to sprout into the young woman of herself. But she's quite heavy because somehow food comforts Helene more than anything else, and she just eats and eats and eats almost into an obesity state from the point of Edith. Edith decides to limit the foods in their calories or what she has access to, and that does slim her down some, but she's concerned for her as a young person to grow so large that it really isn't palatable to either of them to have a daughter like that. It's almost embarrassing if they take her out, and that's very sad because Helene doesn't understand what it is about life or this culture that doesn't really work for her. She has no heart space really in this way of anything unless there's a South American nanny to be with her. But suddenly she grows very, very tall and loses her baby fat and grows very elegant in her shape with large breasts and beautiful big brown eyes in a face that she chooses to anoint with makeup that Edith doesn't really approve of. But she gets very gifted at making herself up and finding costumes that work well to show off her bosom and cleavage and other things that Edith doesn't approve of either. She's a South American, buxom, beautiful woman that is so misunderstood by these white parents of high education degrees that they hardly know what to do with her. Helene matures enough to graduate from high school and adventures up to college, having more fun than you can imagine in a dorm filled with women that laugh and cackle and giggle and date these men. Helene is having a great time because suddenly she's free to be who she is in a world of others, and so she is, and she loves her life and finds a hope for something else that she's going to do. She decides to get her degree in nursing because that will always pay well, and she does. Helene graduates not with the best of grades, but she's a nurse, and she can find a job in a local hospital that pays well. She decides to take herself somewhere else because she needs to grow in a new direction, and she gets an opportunity to go work as a nurse on a cruise line. People come and go usually for motion sickness pills. The rest of the time she can put her beautiful dresses on and show her cleavage and go dance in the evening away with all of the tourists. The cruise line likes it because she's beautiful and everybody wants to dance with her, and she has a grand time. Helene meets a very wealthy man who's very handsome but already married, and he has a fragrant affair with her, flying in and out and flying her to exotic places until she conceives a child. She tells him she's pregnant. He says, "We have to abort it because I can't raise it. I'm married." She didn't know he was married, and that breaks her heart. And so she aborts the child, but she realized that she really wouldn't want to do that alone anyway. He was wealthy, and if he gave her an amazing mansion, perhaps she'd do that, but that obviously wasn't going to come to be so. Helene grieves the change because it was such a fantasy and a fallacy to go be with this elegant millionaire and fly here and fly there and gamble a little and play and make love all night, and some drugs too that she probably shouldn't have taken, that he could afford, that put her in a different place that felt better for a time. She's there as a nurse, and nothing ever bothered her about that either because it's not her style where they need these drugs. So she decides after a time to try to find her hope again and do something else because she's not really happy in whatever's going on as a nurse. That's getting kind of boring, and she doesn't seek out a new job because the money is quite good. So Helene chooses to take dance lessons because she's very pretty and needs to learn how to salsa and waltz and do all things. The dance teacher Ivan chooses to take her in and really coach her to perform at these gala events where he needs somebody absolutely gorgeous to display his gifts and talents. So she learns to dance at his side and has more fun with that than the rest of her life. The nursing is still there to provide for her economy, and he says, "Well, you can teach dance here and in my studio full-time if you wish to." But the economy difference is so huge that Helene said, "I don't think I could really do that. It would be less than half of what I earn, and I couldn't live on that comfortably." Ivan sighed and he said, "I know you could be here sometimes, maybe in the evenings or the weekends and teach." And so she is, and so that play changes. Not about that, but something else is still missing. She enjoys the dance and the costumes and all of that, and that fills it in for the boredom of her job. Helene wishes to do something completely different and doesn't really know what it is. Is it to find a man? Is it to find something else? Is it to go abroad and be a nurse, someplace unusual, that they're willing to hire an American? And nothing that of that nature ever really arises, but somehow in it is an inner fate map. And so she chooses to find the partner of her heart that could inspire her to love and live to the fullness of the experience of a beloved. She is very beautiful and very attractive and has learned to modulate her diet to stay svelte. A beautiful man named Philip comes along that finally charms her heart enough to marry, and they do love each other very much, And yet somehow in all of it is a romance that lasts only 2 years. They don't conceive a child because Helene doesn't really want to and Philip does. He wants to have a baby and it never manifests. And so finally he walks away and divorces her. Once again she finds herself blue and not sure of what to do and hits the dating scene again to see what she can muster. But somehow in the spark of her, she recognizes there's something else she needs to do because this isn't working for her. This kind of partnership that romances and then the romance dies and then the partnership walks away and breaks her heart. Helene decides to go to a Tantra workshop and learn about Tantra from a style of sensuality or understanding that perhaps somewhat Eastern or somewhat something else. She has a grand time at this workshop. There isn't a man in the room that doesn't want to puja with her, including the teacher. And she finds herself orgasming on their laps. They all laugh because it's a style of central flow that can happen to certain women of certain genealogies that somehow do well. So the Tantra teacher invites her to the next workshop and they're kind of expensive and that becomes her second home in a way. She goes to one every 2 months for a time and still dances some, but something about the Tantra fills her in another way. She confesses to the teacher she's really looking for the beloved of her heart. If there's someone that he knows that things might be right, to let her know. The objective of Tantra is to harmonize the energy systems and harmonize the field through sensual flow. They don't talk much about partnership issues, just that seems to work for some people. If they can motion that way regularly in their partnerships. A beautiful man comes along who's rather heavy but very gregarious and very much fun. Helene and Blake date because it's just too much fun to be together. He lives far away and they fly in and out and see one another. Helene continues with her job as a nurse to finance it, and Blake is some kind of legislator. It's very popular in his state. He doesn't work as a person in the public image, but he is behind the scenes with all the politicians. Helene finds that kind of interesting because he has always something odd or unusual or interesting to share, and her mind doesn't always work that way because things at the hospital are pretty much banal in the way they've always been. But sometimes there's humorous stories, but not always. The two finally marry and she moves to the Midwest with him. Blake looks at her as a poster board wife to win an election, and he thinks that she'll be divine as the social queen of himself to host the parties or whatever's necessary to run for governor. There are others backing him and financing the journey. He's a very gregarious character and interesting when he gets on the television or in his interviews. And suddenly Helene is the host of the town as the beautiful buxom bride of Blake, who's running for governor of this small town. He wins with a landslide, and after that she has fun still in his boudoir of things that need to be done for the city. Blake doesn't let her work but handle basically the things that he needs to as an elected official. And Helene somehow finds that much more entertaining than being a nurse than anything you could ever imagine. She gets to know many of the people, and she goes to the women's club and the other things around town to try to understand what's needed. And she realizes there's a need for more homeless shelters. So she appeals to the churches or wherever to take them in. She realizes that they also need a place for women that have been injured or abused to go to that's larger than whatever is offered in the town. And so Helene starts to work it from a political point of view that this is what we need to help with certain things that are a crisis in our town. Blake is very impressed with her capabilities of taking on a position of being not just his wife, but somebody who was asserting herself in the community, and he wins again the next cycle in a landslide election of his own, and it continues with this popularity for many, many years. Helene is very happy in her role and very happy in her marriage, and wishes something else only, maybe a child of her heart, because perhaps it's time to have a child. Blake's not sure about that exactly because it works so well just the way that it is. But she goes off the pill and bingo, she conceives. Now she's going to be the pregnant woman around town also having a baby, and she'll visit the hospitals or children's centers of daycare or kinder care, all these things you think she can do also as a new mother of her own heart. Blake's not sure because her physique is changing, but somehow the baby is born a beautiful little boy. Helene tries very hard to bring back herself to her svelte figure, but finds that kind of difficult when she's gone from when she's through the pregnancy cycle. So she's a little larger and goes to the gym and tries to do all the things that she needs to get fit once the little boy Landon reaches age 2. And somehow she does call it together for the sake of their marriage. Raising Landon is absolutely wonderful, and he's the love of her heart. Helene's very happy, and Blake's still happy in his career as governor. He continues to win elections after elections, and suddenly something else occurs unexpected. It's a natural travesty of a huge tornado that hits apart the neighborhoods of the town. The emergency services come in and finally remove all the dishevelment, and things are getting in order to try to rebuild. But some of the insurance doesn't really cover what they need to, and people end up living in trailers in another part of town rather than having a home that they once had that was destroyed by the tornado. Once again, Helene appeals to something else in the insurance industry to figure it out how to do this differently. And nothing ever comes of that quest because it's just not in the FEMA insurance system to do it right for these people. But her life as a cheerleader of her partner is always there, and the baby grows up sometimes in the public lamplight of having photos taken here and there. Soon Landon is age 9, and he's into his soccer and his football and his basketball and whatever else that he can. He's a large age 9. He looks almost age 16. He's very tall and lanky, and he just likes to be active with physical things. Helene thinks, well, I don't think he's going to be a politician. I think he's going to be something else because he's like a young ape or monkey jumping up and down with these balls and all these things. Maybe we'll teach him golf and it will be a little bit more mature. So he gets out on the golf course and he's actually very good at swinging the club. Sometimes he gets near hole 1 and everybody applauds, and he does good at that too. And that's a better image for the governor to have a son as playing golf than jumping up and down like a monkey someplace, Helene thinks. But all in all, life goes very well for the three of them. And suddenly, Helene conceives again, unexpectedly after a romantic cruise that the two of them get to take due to a gift that came through the city somehow as a donation for the two of them. She has to think about whether she is going to abort this baby, and finally she chooses to because one more is just too much for her and Blake to consider. But the depression is deep after that. She doesn't understand why it is that aborting a child is so wounding to her heart. And she says to Blake, I don't know what's wrong with me. I cry day and night and I can't seem to get over it. And I know you need me there to smile, but I don't know what to do about it. And Blake says, okay, honey, you need to see a psychiatrist. And so she does. And the psychiatrist puts her on an antidepressant. And that only makes Helene feel very, very numb. But it seems to squelch the tears so she can function. But the joy of life is suddenly just seemingly disappeared. She needs to find another direction, and Blake's campaign turns another direction unexpectedly when another mesmerizing candidate shows up and wins the next election. So Blake gears up to do something else, perhaps the city council or something else that he would win popularity. Therefore, he does in the next election cycle, which is about 2 years. He does win his post, and things resume in another direction that he has to come to understand. Blake thinks about running for senator, and that inspires Helene to say, okay, run for senator instead of governor of this town, and we'll see what we can do because you're mesmerizing in front of people, but we need to aspire to the party and also the financial request and also the financial bequest of it because we don't have the money to actually finance that if we needed to. Well, he does win the Democratic position of potential senator of the state and region, and he does win in a landslide because he is very charming and they're off and running on another level of governance. Helene stops taking her antidepressants, and her son's graduating high school now and soon to go to college. Landon gets a beautiful acceptance at Harvard, which surprises her because he's a straight A student. In spite of his early nature being a bit of a loony kid that needed to jump up and down and run here and there, he actually was a straight A student by the time he got to high school. So he goes to Harvard, and she's very happy about that. And the two of them continue to care for their role as senator and senator's wife. Haylene grows out of her depression and finds other things to appeal to on a statewide level that need to be looked at. And that's the end of this story. That's how the castaneda's fable works. You may hit your depression, or you hit something that you can't think you can deal with, and then suddenly you flip it around and find another direction that works for you. The castaneda fable for hope is a very gracious fable. It gives you visions of things you can do or inspire to that really feel well in you. So you look at their visions of what you could do or might do, and you foster them in your life and try them on for size, perhaps, in looking for what is right for you and not somebody else. Well, that's the end of our storyline of the Castaneda fables. I hope you found this useful to your life ahead and trigger yourself to go into the fable of a hope for tomorrow and find something else you can do in your life that really and sincerely and truly fulfills you. If you're depressed, or if you feel like you've faced a loss, or if you're facing a loss ahead, then motion into the hope for a new tomorrow. Redirect your vision to something else that overcomes your loss. Find your direction and renews you into you to be beautiful in this life of yours. And we send to you big blessings and namaste. In New Zealand.